Hello, everyone. Hi. So it's Monday and it's 9 again. So we are back with a new session. And today here again with me, there is Dr. Rushati Dasgupta from Team Vallat. So yes.
Hi,
So,
everyone.
so today we are here with a new session. And today we will be practicing a new set for image set. So let me share my screen first and then we can get started. All right. I hope the screen is visible.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
You can continue.
So image set crash course, it's day 5 and we will be dealing with paper 2. So those who are new to our channel, please do subscribe. And there are 5 videos prior to this where we have talked about image set. So if you haven't watched them yet, please do. And today it's day 5 and let's move on to our first question. Right. Rushati, would you like to read the question?
Yes. So, a forerunner of science fiction, The Blazing World, is a prose fiction by which author? Is it Afraben? Is it Margaret Cavendish? Is it Eliza Hayward? Or is it Delriver Manley? What do you think? Who do you think it is? Yes, it is Lady Margaret Lucas Cavendish. She was also the Duchess of Newcastle upon Tyne. And then Ankita will further tell you about the Blazing World and Margaret Cavendish.
Yes. So this work, The Blazing World by Margaret Cavendish, it is considered as a forerunner of science fiction, and it is also considered as a utopian work. As its full title suggests, Blazing World, it's a fanciful depiction of a satirical utopian kingdom in another world that can be reached via the North Pole. And according to a very prominent critic, Stephen H. Prop, this novel or this work of prose fiction, The Blazing World, it's the only known work of utopian fiction by a woman in the 17th century, as well as it's an example of what we now call proto-science fiction. Although it is also a romance, an adventure story, and even autobiography. So this work was one of a kind and one of the first of its kind. It's a forerunner of science fiction. It's a utopian work. It is also by a woman in the 17th century, and it's a work which contained elements of various genres together, right? So please do look up these works, and we talked about this work in our current update session where we talked about various science fiction novels. So please do look up these works with these various genres, right? Okay, let's move on to the next question.
So this was a previous year question which came in 2018. And the question is, the novel Bone People deals with the natives of which country? Is it Australia? Is it New Zealand? Is it Canada? Or is it England? So this novel is by Kiri Hume. And this was the first New Zealand novel to receive the Booker Prize. So the answer is New Zealand.
Right. So the Bone People, it's a novel by Kiri Hume. This novel was published in 1984. Set on the coast of the South Island of New Zealand, the novel focuses on 3 characters, all of whom are isolated in different ways. This novel talks about a reclusive artist, a mute, that is a dumb child, and the child's foster father. Over the course of the novel, this trio, these 3 characters, develop a tentative relationship and are driven apart by violence and reunite. Maori and Pakeha, this New Zealand European culture, myths, and languages are blended through the novel. The novel has polarized critiques and readers, with some praising the novel for its power and originality, while others have criticized Hume's writing style and portrayals of violence. So this novel talks about how violence works in these areas and how they affect the people of these lands, right? So it's a very important work of New Zealand, and it's written by Kiri Hume. It was published in 1984. So please do be very careful to look up these works of various countries. right? New Zealand, Caribbean literature, Canadian literature, right? Okay. Let's move on to the next question.
So who among the following did not belong to the Yale School? Is it Harold Bloom? Is it Roman Jacobson? Is it Paul Deman? Or is it J. Hillis Miller? So the Yale School is a colloquial name for influential group of literary critics, theorists, and philosophers. So here, who did not belong to the Yale School? So the correct answer is Roman Jacobson.
Right. So let's get to know bit more about these critiques and the school they belonged to. So during the period between the late 1960s and 80s, Yale University was the home of a variety of thinkers who were indebted to Derrida's deconstruction, right? The group included this Yale School. This school included which writers or critiques? This included scholars like Shoshana Feldman, Paul Deman, Geoffrey Hartman, J. Hillis Miller, and Harold Bloom. This group came to be known as the Yale School and was especially influential in literary criticism because Paul Deman, Miller, Hartman, and Bloom all are considered to be prominent literary critiques. The four critics listed above, along with Derrida, contributed to an influential anthology, Deconstruction and Criticism. And all of them, please be very careful about these little things, all of them were inspired by Derrida's deconstruction. And hence the formation of this separate school of thought called Yale School, right? So not only about Yale School, there are other schools like Frankfurt School. So please do look up which schools are there, the stalwarts who belong to this schools of thought, their contribution, how they were different from other schools of thought, the time period in which they existed. These are the points you should be very careful about, right? Next.
I'm coming to the next question. Keats and Shakespeare, this is the name of the work, was it written by John Middleton Murray? Was it written by Lord Devil Cecil? Was it written by Allardyce Nicoll? Or was it written by H.J.C. Grierson? So the correct answer is John Middleton Murray. Keats and Shakespeare. That's the book.
So John Middleton Murray,
Ankita?
as we all know, he was the husband of the famous short story writer Catherine Mansfield. And Murray was a very famous critic in his own right. So this work, Keats and Shakespeare, it talks about mostly the poetic life of Keats and how he in turn was inspired by the poetics of Shakespeare. So it talks firstly about Keats, his poetry career, and in turn how he was inspired by Shakespeare. That's what this text talks about. So please be very careful to look up the important critiques across the decades, right? Not only Murray, there are other important critics as well. So please do look up their works. And again, not only the important ones, but also the lesser known ones as well. Right, next.
That is very important nowadays. So the next question is letters from a father to his daughter. It is a collection of 30 letters written in 1928 to his daughter by which famous politician is it? Is it S. Radhakrishnan? Is it Nirajsi Chaudhary? Is it Jawaharlal Nehru? Or is it Balachandra Rajan? So this has a very interesting story behind it, and the correct answer is Nehru, and he wrote it when he was behind the bars. And along with it's a very good piece of literature now, along with many other works of Nehru. So Ankita will tell you further about it.
So letters from a father to his daughter. It's a collection of letters written by Jawaharlal Nehru to his daughter Indira Nehru back then, because back then Indira Gandhi had not become Gandhi. So it was Indira Nehru, originally published in 1929 by Allahabad Law Journal Press at Nehru's request, and consisting of only the 30 letters sent in the summer of 1928 when Indira was only 10 years old. He arranged a second edition in 1931, and subsequently further reprints have been made because this collection of letters, this collection reflects not only what a father can tell his daughter, but also it's a great piece of erudite literature. These letters not only talk about just literature, but also the various things. Rather, these letters consist of a comprehensive education, actually, which Nehru wanted to inculcate in his daughter through his letters. He couldn't do so physically because back then he was in prison.
Glimpse of a very, we see a very interesting glimpse of the father-daughter duo through
Yes.
these letters.
And so he
Shall we
wanted to
move?
impart some solid education, a comprehensive education through his letters. Since he couldn't do that physically back then, he wrote these letters to inculcate a particular sense of sensibility in Indira. Right, next.
Coming to the next question. So which one of the following characteristics cannot be attributed to Charles Lamb's essays? So only one which is not attributed. So is it metaphysical element? Is it humor and pathos? Is it mystification? Or is it autobiographical element? And the correct answer is metaphysical element. The rest, I mean, humor and pathos, mystification, autobiographical elements, these are there. These are attributed to Charles Lamb's essays, but metaphysical element is not. Cannot be attributed.
So Charles Lamb was one of the most prominent essayists of the late Romantic period. He wrote many essays. And if we look at any of his essays like Dream Children, a Reverie, or The Superannuated Man, or A Dissertation upon Roast Pig, or any of his essays, this autobiographical element, mystification, humor, and pathos, they're very clearly captured in any of his essays you look up. But this metaphysical element, not really. So this is one element which we cannot attribute to Lamb as an essayist. This metaphysical element doesn't really capture his style. But autobiographical elements, mystification, humor, pathos, all of this can be very prominently noticed in his writing style, right? So there it is, and please do look up all the essays of Charles Lamb. Even if you look up the contents of the essays of Eliot, you get all the names, and it will be easier for you to know which essay has been written by him. And such questions come like, which essay among the following has not been written by Lamb? So for that, you should know which essays have been written by Lamb. So please do look up the names of his essays. Very important for any exam. Right, next.
Aurora Lee is an example of a closet drama. Is it a verse novel? Is it a dramatic monologue? Or is it an epistolary novel? Aurora Lee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning is a verse novel. The second option is the correct answer. This was one of my favorite actually. And it is written in blank verse. And it encompasses 9 books, which is known as the number of the Sibyllin books, number of women. And further, Ankita will tell you about it.
Okay. So as Rushati has already mentioned that it's a verse novel in blank verse. It was published in 1856. It presents a first-person narrative from the point of view of Aurora, its heroine. And this poem or this work, this verse novel is set in Florence, Malvern, London, Paris. Settings of important works, very important. So this work references biblical and classical history and mythology, as well as modern novels. And as we have already said, it's divided into 9 books. Please be very careful about the summary, like what happens by the end of this work, the narrative style, the publication year, and the other works of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, like Sonnets from the Portuguese, her poems on various social causes that she has written are very important. So please do look up the entire oeuvre of Barrett Browning. Right, next.
Moving on to Rasselas, which was published in 1759 by Samuel Johnson, is subtitle. So, subtitle of the word. Is it King of Aragon? Is it Prince of England? Is it King of Scotland? Or is it Prince of Abyssinia? And the correct answer is Prince of Abyssinia. And the full title, The History of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia.
Okay. So the history of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia. So it's like an apologue about bliss and ignorance by Samuel Johnson. The book's original working title was The Choice of Life. Be very careful about the original working titles. Like the original working title of Pride and Prejudice was First Impressions. Like in this manner, many works had their original working titles initially, but later they were changed, right, for publication issues and stuff. So the original working title of the history of Rasselas was The Choice of Life. The book was first published in 1759 in England, and it is considered to be a work of philosophical and practical importance, and critics often remark on the difficulty of classifying it as a novel. So there is a confusion regarding the generic categorization of this particular work. And as we all know, Johnson was a fabulous critique. He was a wonderful poet as well. His dictionary, which was published in 1755, was enormously important in the contemporary scenario. And do look up the Juvenalian satiric poems he has written, like The London, The Vanity of Human Wishes, and Samuel Johnson's criticism. That's also very important. He was a pioneer of biographical criticism. He wrote Lives of the English Poets, right? So he was a pioneer of biographical criticism as well.
Also, is very important.
Yes. So please do look up not only his role as a poet, but also his role as a critique in the contemporary scenario of 18th century British literature. Right, next.
Who coined the phrase archy writing? Is it Roland Barthes? Is it Jacques Derrida? Is it Edward Said? Or is it Michel Foucault? So the correct I'll give you a brief introduction to archy writing. It's a philosophy of language. The French work is archy écrite, like écrite feminine. It's like archy écrite, whatever, however the French pronounce. And this was actually coined by Jacques Derrida. Ankita, would you like to explicate further?
So archy writing, it's like an abstract kind of writing, which comes before both speech and actual writing. So it's like an abstract writing, like something which you cannot really see in front of you on the pages, something abstract which you can think or conceptualize, and it comes both before you speak and you start actually writing on the pages. So something abstract, something which you can think. It's like a thought. That's what Derrida meant by archy writing. A type of writing which you can conceptualize maybe mentally, but you cannot see it literally on the pages of your copy or your laptop on the screen. So that is an abstract kind of writing. It was conceptualized by Derrida. Right, next. Okay, so here we have a surprise. Yes, please continue, then I will share this.
Yeah, so the archy, the term actually means origin. So the origin of writing, it is abstract first, right? And then the actual. So yeah, that is what.
So here we have a surprise for you all. Yes. So we, Vallat, we are actually bringing to you a course on Tamil Nadu TRB Assistant Professor exam. And here on the screen, you have got a number of our team, 938-7839-871. If any of you is interested to take up this course from our Vallat, please do contact in this number for your further queries. And we are bringing this course soon. So any of you who will be sitting for this exam, please feel free to ask your doubts to this number, and see you soon.
We actually got a lot of calls from asking for this particular course, and we are introducing it. So yeah, those who had contacted, please contact us again to enroll for this course. Thank you.
Okay.
So can we
Next
move on
question.
now? Yeah. So A is by its possession, a romance returns to the which era? Like, is it of the Old English period, or the Victorian period, the Middle English period, or the Restoration period? So this novel, it returns to which era? That is basically the question, and the answer is Victorian period. This is also another work by White, which I loved actually.
So this novel, Possession, a Romance by A.S. Batt. This novel follows two modern-day academics as they research the paper trail around the previously unknown love life between famous fictional poets Randolph Henry Ashe and Christabel Lamotte. Possession is set both in the present day and the Victorian era, contrasting the two time periods, as well as echoing similarities in satirizing modern academia and mating rituals. So, this novel actually brings together and contrasts both the modern period and the Victorian era. So, it uh, alludes to a return to the Victorian period, right? Okay. And it's one of the most famous works of A.S. Baird. So please do look up all the modern novels.
It
They're
also
very
won her
important.
the Booker Prize, actually, 1990 Booker Prize,
Yes.
this particular novel.
Okay.
So the next question. The Harmony of Church is authored by, is it by William Shakespeare? Is it by Sir Philip Sidney? Is it by Michael Drayton? Or is it by John Milton? So the Harmony of Church is by Michael Drayton.
So as we all know, Michael Drayton was quite a popular writer, but this is not a very popular work by Drayton. It's one of the lesser known works, and this question actually came in one of the set exams, not of Maharashtra, but I think Kerala. So please do look up the lesser known works, and all these writers, Sidney, Milton, Shakespeare, do look up their critical works as well. Like this is a critical work. So do look up the critical works as well. Right, next.
Moving on to a work of Shakespeare. So Touchstone is a famous character in William Shakespeare, which play? Is it All's Well That Ends Well? Is it A Midsummer's Night's Dream? Midsummer Night's Dream? Is it As You Like It? Or is it Twelfth Night? And the answer is As You Like It. So with Shakespeare also, no, the characters has now become very important, especially if he has a fool, that will become important. So yeah, if you look into the characters of Shakespeare and also the chronology of how his plays were published, so these two things about Shakespeare is much more explored nowadays. And about As You Like It and Touchstone, Ankita will further talk
So,
about
As
it.
You Like It is a very popular romantic comedy by Shakespeare. And Touchstone is here a court jester, like a clown, in As You Like It. So, Touchstone is the court jester of Duke Frederick, the usurper's court in As You Like It. And throughout the play, we find Touchstone commenting on the other characters and thus contribute to a better understanding of the play. As we have often seen that these clown characters or these jesters are actually they act as the voices of the writer himself. They are believed to voice the opinions of Shakespeare himself. And that's why we often find them to be very critical of the contemporary society and attitudes, right? So here also, he comments on others' hypocrisies, right? Their attitudes. So they often act as voices of the author himself, and they very sharply criticize the contemporary attitudes, the corruption, and everything they see around themselves. Like these jesters and
It's like a
clowns, they are the
commentary
only
they
ones.
use.
Yes, they're the only ones who even have the power to question the king, to satirize the king. So that's very important, like the role they play, the critical role they play. Okay, they critique the society and the other characters, right? Next.
So moving on, who wrote Daniel Deronda? Who wrote Daniel Deronda? Is it George Eliot? Is it Jane Austen? Is it Emily Bronte? Or is it Charlotte Bronte? Well, the answer is it is written by Mary Ann Evans, the actual name of George Eliot.
Okay. So George Eliot was one of the most important women novelists of the Victorian era. Starting with Adam Bede, she wrote a huge range of novels, and Daniel Deronda was the last of her novels. Okay, so it was the last Victorian novel she completed, and the only one set in the Victorian society of her day. So most of her novels are not set in the Victorian society. Like Adam Bede was set in Hayslope, but it is the only novel by George Eliot which is set in the Victorian society. This work socially satirizes and also does a moral searching, along with its sympathetic rendering of Jewish proto-Zionist ideas, has made it the controversial final statement of one of the most renowned Victorian novelists. So it's a very complicated work for its statement on pro-Jewish Zionist ideas that Eliot made through this work. It's her last novel and a very popular one, right? So please do look up all the works of George Eliot, the settings, because it's the only novel set in the contemporary Victorian society. So what are the settings of her other novels and their chronology, like which came first, which came next, then, and also the characters, heroines, everything, and the philosophy, because George Eliot had a very strong philosophy. She was a strong supporter of realism in her novels. So please do look up these things. Right, next.
A View of the Present State of Ireland is written by, is it by Sir Philip Sidney? Is it by Robert Greene? Is it by Edmund Spenser? Or is it by Thomas Dekker? Well, I'll give you a hint. It is written by the same person who is famously known for Fairy Queen. So yes, it is Edmund Spenser.
So if we just look at the cover page here for a second, so it shows us that a view of the state of Ireland as it was in the reign of Queen Elizabeth. So it talks about the condition of Ireland during the Elizabethan time, and it was written by way of dialogue between Eudoxus and Irenaeus. So this work has been written in the form of a dialogue between these two characters who are talking about the condition of England during the Elizabethan era. And this work, published during 1595-96, it's a tract which argues lucidly for a typical 16th century theory of rule. It is firm measures ruthlessly applied with gentleness only for completely submissive subject populations. So here Spenser is talking about a thorough racist and a colonialist, right? He's talking like a colonial master, where he's only concerned about dominating and suppressing the population of Ireland, even to going the extent that he is ready to let them starve, to bring them under absolute control. So he's talking in that crudish manner. So it's a work which just voices his colonial opinions. He here, more than a poet, he's just acting as a colonial master and voicing his opinions very crudely. Like, I don't see here Spenser as a poet, more as a colonial master, just concerned about colonial expansions and suppression of people. But it has been written in the form of a dialogue. Huh?
Expansion was the only goal for them at that time. Expanding,
right,
like flourishing the empire. That's it. So that ideology is fully reflected in this. Yeah. Moving on, who among the following is not a new critic? Is not a new critic? Is it John Crowe Ransom? It won't be, because you have the picture already here with his work. So is it Clarence Brooks? Is it Alan Tate? Or is it Terry Eagleton? So this is pretty straightforward actually. So the correct answer is Terry Gilton.
So you all know new
Ankita,
criticism. Huh?
Yeah, would you like to tell us about new criticism and
Yes.
Eagle?
So during the post-World War era, this new school emerged of new criticism, which focused just on the text itself. The new critics like J.C. Ransom, Cleant Brooks, Alan Ted, R.P. Warren, they were not bothered about the author's biography or the socio-political cultural conditions in which the text was produced. They were not concerned about any of these things. They only focused on the text and the words they
Close
could see.
reading of the text.
Yes,
A
they
close
believed in
reading
the
of the text itself without the context.
yes,
Or
they
the poet's
believed
past. Anything.
they believed in the isolated and close reading of a particular text. So J.C. Ransom, Cleant Brooks, Alan Ted, they were very much a part of this school of thought. But Terry Eagleton, he was a Marxist philosopher and he was not a part of this school. Right, next.
He's really known as a Marxist critic.
Yeah.
Now moving on, who was responsible for Britain's first organized detective police force, the Bow Street Runners? The Bow Street Runners. Who was responsible for it? Was it Fielding? Was it Smollett? Was it Richardson? Or was it Stern? Well, it was none other than Henry Fielding.
Okay. So to talk about the options first, Fielding, Smollett, Richardson, and Stern, all of them were collectively called as the four wills of the English novel by George Sainsbury. They were the most prominent novelists of the 18th century. And Fielding here was actually responsible for this first organized detective police force of Britain, that is the Bow Street Runners. So the Bow Street Runners were the law enforcement officers of the Bow Street Magistrates Court in the city of Westminster. They have been called London's first professional police force. The force originally numbered 6 men and was founded in 1749 by Magistrate Henry Fielding, who was well known as an author. So he was the one who was responsible for this force. Right? Next.
So this is also a previous year question, so note it down. Which of the following texts can be classified as belonging to the Middle English literature? So is it Kidman's Hymn and Beowulf? Is it the Fairy Queen, Astrophel and Stella, and the Spanish tragedy? Is it Walpole, the White Devil and the Changeling? Or is it Pierce Plowman, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and the Canterbury Tales? So this is also an easy one. So the correct answer is Piers Plowman, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and Canterbury Tales. The Canterbury Tales is the most famous work of that era itself. And even Piers Plowman and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is also very famous during the Middle English literature, a very important work of the Middle English literature.
Okay. So Caedmon's Hymn and Beowulf, they are the works of Old English period. Fairy Queen, Astrophel and Stella, the Spanish tragedy, all of them were written during the Elizabethan period. Volpone, the White Devil, the Changeling. These are the works of the Jacobean period. So Piers Plowman by William Langland, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight by the unknown Pearl poet, and the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, obviously, they belong to the Middle English period. Next.
The famous term culture industry was coined by, was it by Theodore Adorno? Was it by George Lucas? Was it by Stuart Hall? Or was it by Roland Barthes? The famous term culture industry was coined by Theodore Adorno. The correct answer is Theodore Adorno.
So, as we know, Theodore Adorno was a prominent member of the Frankfurt School. And this culture industry was one of the important theoretical concepts propounded by them. So what does this concept mean? It refers to the passive consumption of this mass culture. Like when we watch a masala Bollywood movie, we just sit with a bucket of popcorn and we just watch it passively. We don't really question if a man single-handedly is fighting 1,000 gundas, or a heroine is jumping about in the sky. So we don't question these things, feeling suspension of disbelief, right? And this is what culture industry means, where we as audience, we are passive consumers of this mass culture. We are not using any critical thought. That's culture industry. We are just passive cartoons ourselves watching another cartoon. That's what culture industry is. A perfect commodity. The culture is becoming a commodity. The culture like acting, dancing, all of these are culture, right? They constitute a culture. And this culture is becoming a commodity, which are packaged in beautiful packages and shown to everyone in big screens and big halls. And we just sit there passively and watch anything they show us. That's what Adorno meant by culture industry. Next.
Moving on, Shelley defends poetry against the attack of whom? Is it Robert Southey's attack? Is it Walter Scott's attack? Is it Thomas Love Peacock? Or is it Samuel Taylor Coleridge? This is an easy question. This was very easy. So the correct answer is Thomas Love Peacock.
So Thomas Love Peacock had written this work, The Four Ages of Poetry, where he talks about the iron, gold, and silver ages, iron, gold, silver, and brass ages of English poetry, and he attacks poetry very harshly. In response to that, Shelley wrote A Defense of Poetry. There he defends not only poetry, but the role of poet as well as a prophet and seer and a nightingale. So, and it was published posthumously after his death in 1840. So both of these are very popular critical works of the Romantic era. Both of these works propound very critical and important ideas about poetry in the Romantic movement, poetry during the Romantic movement, and it also reflects a history of poetry all across the eras, and how with time poetry has degenerated. So when this criticism was raised against poetry, Shelley came to defend not only poetry but also the role of the poet. Because we all know Romantic movement was a very critical time, Romantic period rather. It was a time of revolutions, industrialism, and so much more. So it was a very sensitive time, a precarious time to say. And this defense was a much needed defense to, again declare the superiority of poetry. Because poetry is not just a poet expressing his emotions, but also it's a democratic platform where many ills of society are talked about, right? So much needed critical tract of Thomas Love Peacock and a much needed defense. Yeah.
Yes.
Right, next.
Did you have your dinner? Ankita, I'm asking you.
No, not yet. I will eat a bit later.
This just reminds me, even we have to go for dinner. So this is the last question for today. And the question is, Curries and Other Indian Dishes is a work of which famous Indian writer? Is it R.K. Narayan? Is it Mulk Raj Anand? Is it Rudyard Kipling? Or is it Vikram Seth? Well, this particular one is by Mulk Raj Anand. Curries and Other Indian Dishes.
So mostly we know Mulk Raj Anand by his works like Untouchable or Munnu or Two Leaves and a Bud, or his autobiographical works. But this is a very lesser known work of Mulk Raj Anand, and I thought a very interesting one at that. So please do look up all the works of all the Indian writers. Very important for any exam you sit for. Not only any set, net, anything. So please do look up the works of Indian writers. Right.
Now that the syllabus is relying on the Indian authors a lot.
Yes.
So knowing the lesser known works, it's very important. So that with that, we come to an end of this session. And I hope you enjoyed it.
A reminder to all of you that we are starting this course on Tamil Nadu TRB Assistant Professor exam. So if you are interested to join this course, please do contact us on through the number you can see on the screen, and we will catch up with you soon. And with that, I think we can end our session today.
Okay, bye. Good night, everyone.
Yes. Bye. So please do like the video if you like the session, and see you all again tomorrow.